this week in research methods in kinesiology. For this week, we are going to learn the following. We have the following objectives for our lesson. We want to understand how to describe and define descriptive research methods. We will discuss the steps in conducting descriptive research methods. We'll identify the strengths and weaknesses of descriptive research methods. Before we begin, we need to have a background and understanding exactly what descriptive research is. You need to know that research methods, descriptive research methods are used to basically just when you want to describe a trend or growth pattern, maturity, the attitudes or perceptions of a people or a group of people. So we're not doing experimental designs. We are just describing the trends. It's sort of like doing, when we talked about statistics, we talked about descriptive statistics where we use the means or averages, frequencies, rank order, and we just use that to describe what the numbers tell us. And it's kind of the same thing with descriptive research. We look at a group of people or an individual and we just describe what is going on. So our approach with descriptive research is different than with experimental design, where in experimental design we are trying to determine a cause and effect between variables, between our does the independent variable have an effect and cause the effect of change on the dependent variable. Well, in descriptive research, we're not doing that. All we are doing is describing what is there. And then from there, we kind of can make some conclusions or about the data and about the population or the subjects. And again, our data with descriptive research is going in. We're just going to use the means, standard deviations, frequencies, those type of numbers. We're not going to use statistical analysis like ANOVAs or any of those type of things with descriptive research. All right, we're going to talk about our different types of descriptive research. The first one we're going to talk about is developmental research. And we use this when we want to see change in people. So, for example, if we want to see how young people grow over time, we would use a developmental research, hence the term developmental. We want to see how people develop over time. It can be used with young people, it can be used with adults, it can be used with older people. See how they change over the period of time. And we usually there are two main types of developmental research. One is longitudinal, and the other one is cross-sectional design. And we talked about these two designs in survey research because you can there's some linkage or uses in both survey research and here in descriptive research. So first we're going to talk about longitudinal designs. Like when we talked about and briefly talked about this in survey research, longitudinal means we're going to follow the subjects for a long period of time. So we got the word long in there, so that tells us that it's a long study. I mean, we're talking years here with this type of study. It can be 3, 4, 5 years with longitudinal design, and we want to see how they change over time. And I'll give you an example of a longitudinal design. In my dissertation, what I looked at was professional socialization of athletic training students. And what that is we all have experienced it. Just think about most of you coach, or most of us have all been in part of athletics most of our lives. And when we first are a part of a team, there's a period where you don't feel like you're part of the team. And as a coach, or even an administrator, one of our goals is try to make those players feel like they're part of the team. And we do certain activities to do that. We may take them on retreats, we may just have fun times, you know, blah, 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 whatever you may end up doing to try to make that player, each player, feel like they're part of the team. And in the past, maybe that was hazing and those type of things. But in the end, we want to make sure that each player feels like they're part of the team. Well, that's what professional socialization is. It's trying to understand how an individual becomes part of a business organization, and how do they feel, what process do they take to become part of that team, part of that organization. Well, I say all that because in the research that I did, there were a lot of studies in nursing students' socialization. And a lot of those studies that were done were longitudinal studies where they looked at a nursing student, a group of nursing students at the very beginning of the nursing education program, and tracked them during their 2 or 3 year program, and wanted to see the process that they went through to become socialized into the nursing profession. And some of those studies also followed them up after they left the nursing school, then went into their job for the first couple of years, and also saw the conflict between what it was like to be a student and what it was like to be in the profession. And so that's a longitudinal design. We study them for a long, long period of time. This is typically done with interviews, surveys, can be a design we're going to talk about later. Is called observational or type study. It was very qualitative, which means not a lot of numbers were used. And we'll talk about that later in this semester. Qualitative with a little bit of quantitative, which we use numbers, but a lot of this was qualitative stuff I'm talking about. And a lot of this type of longitudinal designs are qualitative with interviews and surveys. So our strengths with longitudinal designs, as you can probably think about, is just that you can track the behavior of individuals over a long period of time and really measure and see what's going on with those subjects and hopefully determine the reason for the change in the behavior. The weaknesses of this design, this is not a very good design at all for research and graduate students at all, because if we're talking about years, the main weakness is the time. It just takes a lot of time. And so it's not this is not a good graduate student type research method at all. Another weakness for this type of study is called, what I love, one of my favorite terms in research is called subject mortality. That means the subject dies if we're talking about elderly, or they drop out if we're talking about young kids. The student's parents may get a new job and they have to move away, so now you have one less subject in your study. So time, subject mortality, that means the subject is gone, they're no longer there. Another issue is natural maturity. How much of the change is due to because the group of students or a student or the people just naturally mature. We talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago in experimental design is one of our threats to internal validity is history and maturity. How much do they mature, and how much can we really attribute maturity and just what's going on to that. The last weakness for longitudinal design is is when the subjects become familiar with any kind of test that you may give. Let's say that your study is designed to see how 4th, 5th, 6th graders, you follow a group, the 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade on their upper body strength, and then you measure that with pull-ups, for example. Well, maybe the students just become familiar with the pull-up and they know how to cheat and they know how to get better at it. And so that's kind of a weakness. That's true of any kind of test that we give, though. So that's just a thing that we realize, and we just have to write it into our limitations and realize that's an issue. There's not much we can do with that. So again, longitudinal designs are we examine a group of students or individuals, people. That can be small numbers, can be 2 or 3 people, it can be large numbers, 50 people. It just depends on the design. And we follow that group of individuals, that subjects, participants, over a long period of time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on